Yeah, we have to have some level of, and this is the thing. This is the establishing to actually have conversations with people. I understand the average person would probably not be able to sit down and have a conversation like Stephen and I are having about this. I probably would not be able to sit down and have a conversation like this back in 2014 when I was had a whole different take on this, and I'll probably will expand on that further on below, where it's like I had to apologize to the person who I had this mental thought with, because if I had, yeah, anyway, it's that was before I actually looked into it, and this is me choosing to be more into politics, look more and research into these actual topics, get to things like exactly like seeing this, where instead of just accepting what people say, oh, the poor women, or the women who are raped, because it's not like, yes, it's horrible the women got raped. Yes, it's horrible about the women in poverty. Like, we need to actually deal with these people. Like, but then you actually look at the statistics, the amounts of actual rapes that are reported. Now, again, some of them aren't reported, but even if it's not reported, it's not a situation where the amounts of abortions that are in this one study that I saw in Florida, or it was in Florida, and then also one that did a further one. Yes, it was a few thousand people, but you look at the actual things, and it's still a situation where it was less than 0.1%. So even if it's like 3 times, if it's 10 times that much, it'd be 0.1%. And yes, that is still that could still be millions of women when you're talking about a global population. It can still be hundreds of thousands of people when you're talking about a population like the United States of America. So that's still a lot of people. But for most people, they're accepting that those people in those situations, most states, most locations that have limitations, have exceptions for them. And that's something that I didn't really know. So once I saw that, I was like, okay, it's horrible, and I need to advocate for exceptions in this, because that's where I stand on this. Then I saw, okay, the poor women. There's a lot more. There's the poor women than women who are just being raped. They might just not really have the knowledge, or not, but in some kind of situation. But then I actually looked at the figures. This is a chart that you sent to me. I think Rollo Tomassi or somebody else had posted this with the abortion rates among income gap. And it
Yeah,
turns
that's
out
what
that,
yeah.
yeah, I just sent it to you in the chat, and it turns out that 31.9% of those who abort are 400% over the poverty level. And then the inverse, that's 3% more than those who are below poverty level, which is about 28% around there. And then most of them are between that. But 200, so twice and over the poverty level is more than 50%. So it's actually even more than 50. It's like 60% of them. My maths again are terrible, so I'm not even gonna try to, okay, the math here is 16, 16. So yeah, it's about 50% are over, 200% over, and then 50% below. So why is it that we seem to focus on this the same percentage of people who are in there? And yes, maybe the same, because the women who are wealthier, who are working with these businesses, the Apples, these Fortune 500 companies, they're probably in that cohort of 400% higher, because especially younger women in their 20s, single women tend to earn more money than single men in that same age range. That's in part because they're also doing office jobs, a lot of them in urban areas and things like this. There's different programs to get them involved in this, more office jobs versus different ones. And then eventually the men start earning more. But those women have more flexibility, and those are the ones who get, what was it, 80% of the abortions are done by women in their between 20 and 26 or something. I forget what the actual stats were, but that's how most of the actual ones are actually done. So that cohort, how come we're focusing more on the people in poverty versus the wealthier ones who could do that? Maybe because the wealthier ones already, okay, they're going to be handled, they'll be able to do it, so it's not really that big of an issue. But realize that when that happens, that there's as many wealthier ones. So it's not necessarily also an issue of not being able to afford having a kid is the primary reason people abort, because these women in the 400%, they could probably afford it. Yes, their quality of life would change. You would have to make certain decisions. Maybe they have different hopes. And maybe a wealthy woman can think, if I'm at this job, if I maintain this job for 10 more years, I'll be 800% over the poverty level. And at that point, I think I'll be able to provide a better life for my kid. So at that point, I want to do it. But to try and pretend and act like, due to some lack of education, this woman was smart enough to be educated to earn that much, but isn't smart enough to be educated to plan how to not conceive. Like, I don't know. What's your take on this realization?
I just see an avoidance of responsibility. I mean, that's all. I'm just going to call that out every time, because it's like, I mean, all the reasons of birth control we mentioned. I mean, I don't know if you've looked into this at all, but I was talking to my friend about like sex ed. Like, they've said it hasn't really helped like unwanted pregnancies. And it's like, I don't really have a quick and easy solution here, because I think of like what my health teacher told us about how like most health teachers just tell you don't drink, don't do drugs. And she's like, I don't want you guys to do that, but I also acknowledge the reality that some of you are going to anyway. So my advice to you is more like, I recommend you don't drink, but if you do, be responsible. And I'm more in line with that, because it's like, you're not going to stop teenagers from having sex altogether, but it's like, I don't think if teenagers are getting, if like my friend who's like, oh, I know all these teens who had abortions, like something is wrong with that. Like teenagers shouldn't be that. I mean, teenagers are irresponsible in general, but it's also like I would question what kind of home life do they have? How involved are the parents? Like I can't imagine coming home to my parents as a teen and telling them I impregnated someone. Like they would flip out. You know?
Thank you for listening. This has been a clip from an actual longer recording that I'll try to leave a link to on the screen or somewhere around here where you're listening to this.
Presents. 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 Presents.
Peasants.
Okay. Okay.